What a what a day. What a day in the United States. Um there's a couple things I want to say before I read the piece that I wrote. Um Up until recently, most laws, most governmental operations have not held any sort of a place in my brain. I knew that Roe versus Wade was on the table. I knew what it was about. I know what Roe versus Wade is about. Excuse me. So, in knowing what Roe versus Wade is about, in knowing that a lot of life is moving in the direction of acceptance, diversity, I thought that it was a joke. That this was already settled so long ago in the courts. Clearly, we've progressed far enough as a civilization and as Americans to understand the value of Roe versus Wade. I was wrong. How absolutely wrong I was. Something that I think a lot of us here in the United States takes for granted. Quickly reminded. It made me sick. Physically sick. I knew it existed. I knew the law was on the table. I had faith that humanity in the United States would prevail. The things from the 19 we'd learned something. That Roe versus Wade was implemented because of that knowledge. And now, in some perverse twist, gone. I got up from my desk at work and I paced around the office. I couldn't think. I couldn't work. I couldn't speak. I imagine that feeling is something that a lot of people in life is just going by. Worry about our own problems. It's no big until the side of their house is blown open. So much of the United States, I feel, was earned by people standing up in what they believed in. There are a lot of women in my life, not in a lewd sense, of course. In a, I have a mother and mothers. Sister. Sisters. I thought of all these women that I know, my friends that I've made along the way, also women. I thought about how awful they must feel right now. And it made me really mad. Really mad. So rather than make a post, whatever, social media claiming my standpoint and letting it, I decided that I would educate myself. At 2 o'clock today, I think it was around 2 o'clock. I'm trying to think when the news that Roe versus Wade overturned came through. When I learned that, I immediately felt I had to do something. I couldn't sit still. I couldn't just let this be. I decided that because women's rights are so important, that I owed it some amount of research before I started just spouting things off. Something that seems so sorely missed in life these days. Accountability. Before I wrote this, and before I'm reading it to you shortly, did a lot of research on my own. It wasn't hand-fed to me. It wasn't told to me by word of mouth. I found all these documents on my own accord on public sites. So you can too. I'm going to be creating a channel on my Discord about RoeVWade to have a space in my community if people want to discuss it. Discuss the ins and outs, voice their opinions, find research. I'm going to be posting the links to every article I mention in this paper in that Discord forum. So if you want to read for yourself the topics that I chose, if you want to listen to the audio source that I quote in my paper, the link for that will be there as well. Unfortunately, this isn't going away anytime soon. To that end, I started typing. I clocked out at work and sat at my desk and typed. And 2 hours later, I had this that I will read for you now. I am disgusted, disappointed, angry, dare I say enraged. What happened today in the US is as follows. Roe versus Wade was overturned. Roe versus Wade gave women the power to make their own decisions regarding pregnancy. Within reason, of course. For example, post-womb viability, etc. Today, Mike Pence was quoted in an article from the New York Times. It said, by returning the question of abortion to the states and to the people, this Supreme Court has righted a historic wrong and reaffirmed the right of the American people to govern themselves at the state level in a manner consistent with their values and aspirations. A noble concept. I hope you all realize the level of vagueness is dangerous. A boiled down version of this was made by another person quoted in the same article, a person by the name of Stephanie Lai, who said, people need to understand this doesn't end abortion and just simply gives it back to the state, allowing states to make their own laws. Doesn't that just promote further separation? Further bias? That you're allowing states, and I do that intentionally, this thing that I'll explain in a few minutes, states to create their own laws and rules around it? Just keeping in mind, of course, not to step on Big Brother's toes. What is going to happen if you grew up in an opposing views state and decided to move? That your values that you grew up with your entire life weren't acceptable practice in the region you wanted to live in. That your kind, the pro-choice, aren't welcome here. Is that the more accepting, open United States they keep alluding to? That the state is now allowed to be prejudicial against certain beliefs. That they can impose restrictions on the very people who made us. That last statement has a bit of a devil's advocate effect. There's a lot of sides to this situation. I feel it's important to not pick a side right out of the gate. Truly think of literally whatever it is from as high of a perspective as you can achieve. Once the outlining topic is figured out, then you can whittle down to emotions and social acceptance things of that nature. The untangible regional feelings should come into play long after that bird's eye view is achieved. What Roe v. Wade did was take that bird's eye view. It looked at the scientific information regarding women's health, post-womb viability, I imagine the effects of children who were unwanted and birthed regardless. Countless other factors. To me, Roe v. Wade was the correct decision. There were rules put in place where the state was allowed to intervene later in the pregnancy term. But the ultimate right was still with the person who was pregnant. There is a stigma surrounding abortion. Do you know anyone who's had an abortion? Do you? Take a moment and think. Have they ever brought it up to you? Were they proud? Were they celebrating? Do you think they might want to be a mother someday? That life for women isn't just to stay home and make babies. I've spoken to a few women who have had abortions. Abortions are soul-crushing. The majority of women are well aware of the immense power they possess. I'm not speaking about political or financial or even educational. Women have the power to create life. Men play an integral part of this life soup process. But it's the women who take that life soup. They use their bodies willingly to bring about an evolutionary process of science that we adore. I got like something in my mouth. That's gross. We celebrate our pregnant women. We throw parties. We welcome these new people into the world and hope they aspire to their own greatness. What happens when the table wasn't set? What happens if you made a poor split decision in the heat of the moment with the person you loved? Or someone took advantage of you when you were vulnerable? Now all of a sudden, you're faced with a never-ending, life-altering decision. Roe versus Wade provided enough evidence to support around when viability occurs. Essentially, viability at its definition is as follows: the ability to survive or live successfully. Science supported this by defining that if removed or independent from the mother, it would survive. I'm comfortable agreeing with that, at least to an extent. Of course, there are outlying circumstances where even those. The point is, this has already been hashed out. It's not where you're from, what state you live in, what country you live in. The process of life is not a group process. You are not carrying the baby. I am not carrying the baby. We collectively are not carrying the baby. The woman pregnant is carrying the baby. It is feasting off of her body until it can grow enough to be able to survive on its own. It should be up to her whether or not to let that happen. So what are we going to do about it? What can we do about it? There's a feeling of helplessness when things like this happen. I'm a man, and I felt helpless. I still feel helpless. The whole reason I'm doing this right now is because when times are at their worst, the most courageous thing you can do is stand up. Can you look your mother in the eye and say, if someone raped you and you got pregnant, I would not support that abortion? If you can't say that, stand up. If you can't tell your high school sister, I know life was just getting started for you, but you made a life-ending mistake. Stand up. If you would consider harming someone who took advantage of your own fucking daughter, rather than force her to carry an unwanted pregnancy, stand the fuck up. What can we do? Well, I feel more than ever we can do something. When one door closes, you know the saying, another opens. I can't recall the quote specifically or who said it, but the overarching message was that life can be hell. We can strive to make it less hell. Almost a manageable suffering. A hell that we can shape, or we can succumb to the powers that be. That power is now with the states in this matter. The government has essentially said, this isn't our problem anymore. And are letting fucked up viewpoints fester in pockets of society. The state governments are where we need to point our energy now. The state governments have the power to make these decisions. Are you happy with how your state is handling this issue? The state reps, as far as I know in layman's terms, are a lot more replaceable. Don't like your state's stance? Let the reps know. Vote in people with human values that stand by them. If they don't live up to your expectations, vote them out. Find someone who does. Most politicians have tap danced really well about how they've worded this process. But I fear, in a roundabout way, that this is going to foster a blending of church and state. The verbiage Mr. Pence was quoted, "The right of the American people to govern themselves at a state level in a manner consistent with their values and aspirations," almost directly screams religious intervention. So then I asked myself this question: what makes up an area's values, an area's aspirations? Both values and aspirations are personal things. They vary wildly from person to person, from house to house, from street to street, from town to town. You get the idea. You, the government, open the door to allow states to base their laws rather than on factual data which supports women's rights to choose, but on subjective morality. Let's take a stab and see if Fold Rick is right. Without looking at the list of states, I decided to just pick one and learn about it and see if I could predict anything about it. And I chose the state of Alabama. Nothing against Alabama. Don't believe I've ever visited it. I know there's a lot of nice people there. That's all I really know about Alabama. It's down south. It's near Florida. I preface this with I gathered all this information from the top few searches that I did on each particular topic, so please take that with a grain of salt. The first thing I searched for in my quest was the primary religion of Alabama. From pewresearch.org, they say Alabama is 86% Christian. Okay, so we've got a baseline. Got it. Enough power to vote something through based on beliefs. Next, I Googled, does the Christian faith believe in abortion? From Wikipedia, Christianity and Abortion, it states, the church has affirmed that every procured abortion is a moral evil. How much do you want to bet that if not now, Alabama will soon also ban abortion? Again, when I was writing this, I had no idea yet. I hadn't gotten that far. Well, in doing my due diligence, as it may, I learned that Alabama already attempted to overturn Roe versus Wade in 1973. They were denied, but allowed to limit abortions to the first trimester. Furthermore, Alabama created the Human Life Protection Act, or the HLPA, 2019. The HLPA now act as a trigger law, criminalizing all abortion immediately. Trigger laws are put in place so that in the event something occurs, the law is enabled. In the overturning of Roe versus Wade, it was posted on a CNBC website that 22 states, 22, had laws or constitutional amendments that were already in place, which can quickly be used to ban abortion. On October 29th, 2019, the U.S. District Judge Myron Herbert Thompson issued a preliminary injunction against the HLPA. Again, that is the Human Life Protection Act. So Judge Thompson wrote an opinion in which he argued that Alabama's abortion ban contravenes clear Supreme Court precedent. It violates the right of an individual to privacy, to make choices central to personal dignity and autonomy. It diminishes the capacity of women to act in society and to make reproductive decisions. It defies the U.S. Constitution. I wanted to learn more about the HLPA. Read about who lobbied it, who the supporters were, and who the primary author of it was. Eric Johnson, the president of the Alabama Pro-Life Coalition, wrote the Human Life Protection Act. Quest continues. I searched for Eric Johnson. The first link that came up was, meet the lawyer behind Alabama's abortion ban. Fantastic. That is exactly what I was looking for. Upon clicking the link, I am brought to thegospelcoalition.org. I digress. I listened to the full podcast of the interview that they show on their own website. It's important when you feel strongly about a topic to seek out those who also feel strongly about the other side. My personal style is to find recordings of them rather than be unprepared confronting them and make a fool of myself trying to refute the things they say. I want to know from their own mouth, without my intervention. He mentions in this interview anecdotal evidence that before Roe versus Wade, life was moving on fine. That the HLPA was designed as a 20-year strategy specifically to reverse Roe versus Wade. They thought that the court case Pro-Life versus Casey would be their tipping point. I understand the interview that I listened to was on a religious forum, so it's understandable that he would bring up religious points to the conversation. However, he was adamant when he brought up the Pennsylvania justices were conservative Roman Catholic, and that Catholics are protective of life, and still they didn't support it. He also states around 5 minutes and 40 seconds into the interview, while they were discussing the timelines around 92, he states, well, as long as the Supreme Court is constituted by the people that are on it, or ones like them, there is no point in attacking Roe again. We don't want to create another bad precedent. Does this remind you of any recent positional shifts in government's history? Any recent changes? Any handing over of the figurative baton? Instead of saying, the people have spoken, they created the Alabama Human Life Protection Act, drafted by none other than the Alabama Pro-Life Coalition, drafted by Eric Johnson. Drafted so that if overturned, he would rip the rug out from under women so fast you'd swear he was David Blaine. My synopsis for Eric is this. He is a passionate man with strong beliefs. He saw something he felt was wrong and went to action doing something about it. Eric is not a bad man. Those who support him are not bad people. I want to make implicitly clear, I have no intention of smearing anyone. I'm attempting to point out the facts with the information available to me, to us, on a topic that everyone on this planet should be concerned about. Alabama was just a random state that I chose for the topic. Since our country is seemingly more focused on what you believe versus reality, my statement is as follows. I live in a state that is, I'm going to define it as pro-women. I feel that this, overturning Roe v. Wade, was a massive backstep in civilized society. If what happened today in overturning Roe versus Wade made you feel that it was an injustice, stand up. This move is allowing religion to creep back into politics. That localized values and feelings are more important than standard science-based values. Stand up. I haven't learned a lot about the pro-life movement. Maybe because I am so staunchly pro-choice. I will, however, be educating myself on what it's all about, why it exists, where its intentions are derived from. We need to play their game with the cards we're dealt. It starts with your local government. Thank you for your time.